the recording of a lesson for your own personal reflection.
The power of refining and improving your delivery of classroom routines. You know, it is probably the easiest lever to pull in terms of improving our own classroom practice.
And going through the video with other colleagues' mental models of what they think good practice is, and sharing that tends to be more efficient.
We don't want to add extra barriers or extra steps because it's just such a good idea that we just want to make it as simple as possible for every teacher in the world just to do it.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Cowling and McLoughlin. Will, how are you guys? Great to see you again.
Thanks very much, Kieran. It's great to be back on the show. Had a great time last time, so I'm looking forward to today.
Hi, Kieran. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be back on. I'm doing absolutely fantastic.
Yes, I mean, since the last time you guys have been on, you've been going gangbusters. I mean, Jack, you are leading. Is it Teach Like a Gem? Is that the parlance that they've used? You know, for which looks like really exceptional coaching. And Will, tomorrow you are at the Abu Dhabi Teaching Conference, and I always get the name mixed up, but I know that you're talking about you're talking about this very thing actually this weekend.
Yes, it's I've done a session with a colleague on the use of visual models in school, and I'm doing another geeky one on my favourite topic, direct instruction. So yeah, very exciting weekend ahead.
And as for myself, Kieran, yeah, you're right. It's been gangbusters. I've jumped into a new role, middle leadership. My role is a literacy coach, but it's a little bit more than that. I'm teaching IGCSE, ESL. I am instructional coach. I am intervention as well for reading and writing, teaching and learning, helping with PD as well. So lots of different bits and bobs and learning on the way, but it's a good challenge for me. I'm really enjoying it.
School improvement doesn't necessarily mean what we think it should mean, but actually seeing you get a chance to really implement those sort of approaches and strategies that are grounded in what we would call the evidence, for lack of a better term, is fantastic. And I saw your reflection about teaching ESL to older students the other day, and I thought that's really, really, really powerful. So I mean, there's probably another couple of episodes with both of you there as we move forward. But Will, at the last summit conference, you spoke, about your use of video recorded lessons. And Jake, I'd seen you had posted some before, and I thought actually this would be something fantastic to talk to you both about. Now, before we get started, I'm talking about the recording of a lesson for your own personal reflection. Has anyone codified it or given it a name that we can use? And perhaps I could use in the title, because at the minute it's quite a long and drawn out video recorded lessons for professional development.
I've just called it self-coaching.
Let's go with self-coaching. Perfect.
Self-coaching then. And so what was the moment that you realized that recording lessons could be more than just watching yourself teach?
I realized the power of visual models when the Step Lab documentary came out last year. I'd seen a few online previously, but that to me was an absolute game changer for me in terms of my attention to detail in classroom practice. That visual model was transformative for me because I saw what all the theory looked like when implemented with fidelity were really well. And so seeing other people teach in a superhero fashion was transformative to my own practice. And I wanted to spread that to other colleagues who hadn't seen that documentary. And that was the main reason why I first got into looking at visual models.
I think it came about organically for me. I was trying to diagnose what was going wrong with my practice. And I kind of came across sort of an article from Peps McRae on banking routines. He talks about like having an investment phase and then that payoff phase being great for the long run. So I sort of had read that, and then at the same time was sort of battling with a new instructional routine. It was actually what I presented on at the Thinking Deeply or was it in Abu Dhabi? The one you came with, Kieran, I forgot the name of it, but I presented on visual instruction plans. And that was the instructional routine I was having difficulty with. I was like, there was many different elements to it, lots of constituent parts. So like choral response, it's sort of like an elaborated worked example. So you're writing up snapshots of the algorithm, but then also questioning the students at the same time. So giving and then waiting for choral responses, but then you're writing at the same time. So there's lots going on, and I just wasn't having success with it. So I just decided, okay, let's maybe perhaps film it and see what's going on and what's going wrong. And there was quite a lot. And so it sort of came from there. And from that, I saw there was more to it than just the routine itself. There was things I was noticing from my students as well. So in frame, I not only had myself, but I had all the students sitting in their seats, and I noticed so inattentiveness, maybe some things in my classroom that were actually in the way of my instruction. So like classroom displays, and lots of other different things too. So it was not only like the instruction, but like other classroom variables that I maybe wasn't consciously aware of, and then having that film sort of objectified everything that I had in the classroom going at that time. And so I really liked that. I was like, oh, hang on, I could fix that up. I had the digital clock at the front of the classroom, and I noticed like at the end of the lesson, kids were sort of looking at it. It's like, okay, break time's coming soon. And I was like, well, they're not even, looking at my exit ticket or thinking consciously about that. So yeah, there was lots of different things that I thought about when I watched myself teach through video. Also noticing, lots of different, like the way that I spoke, utterances, sort of, I was going back to the same thing. And there was some things that I just, going minute detail, but there was lots of things that first appeared when I first videoed myself. And that sort of started my journey of self-coaching through video.
The level of detail that you've gone into with your reflections, just it's brilliant. And you only really see that when you're a fly on the wall of your own classroom. And you can only do that when you've got a visual camera to go back over. And so absolutely, I completely agree with everything you said there, Jake. And the power of refining and improving your delivery of classroom routines. It is probably the easiest lever to pull in terms of improving your own classroom practice. And you only get that. You only can see that if you're seeing yourself teach and notice those imperfections yourself. Just going to round this off with my 3 big ideas of why I think visual recordings are so powerful. And so the first thing is, as you say, Jake, is we're noticing subtle imperfections in the way we deliver classroom practice. And we're going for the real granular stuff here. The slightly rephrasing classroom instruction, the slight timing of something, or you notice that one or two children are just losing attention at one point, and you try to pick up on what was the cause that led to that. So that's the first thing. And the next thing is understanding the experience of the students in the room. And you're trying to firstly see yourself teach and see the clarity of your explanation, but also just see what the students in the room are doing at any one moment in time. So that's 2. And the third thing for me is, this is a bit off the idea of reflections. But, if you are, as I know you are, Jake, but if you're someone who's passionately wants to support colleagues and work with colleagues, to care about classroom practice, as in that we want to consistently improve and refine our classroom practice. Sharing what we're talking about when we're having these discussions. So I filmed myself doing a mini whiteboard routine. It's not just a show me whiteboards go. There's a whole practiced routine for how the back row shows me, next row, next row, next row, excellent. And I'm scanning from left to right each time. And that level of detail about the routines. So we can really communicate what it looks like to colleagues. And just on that one, when they see that these ideas that can seem draconian when they're described to us, or really strict when they're described to us, like cold call or like slants, things that sounded scary to me, sounded too strict to me when I first heard of these ideas. When we see the response of students in a warm and friendly classroom with high expectations, we see the response of these students. That worry we have about how it's going to be perceived in terms of relationships with students kind of fades away when you see that it can be done in a really positive environment.
Is it the soft bias of low expectations? Is that how it's described? I can't remember exactly the phrase, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because there's a whole grift out there about, about how slant is the devil incarnate, but actually having high expectations in your classroom is better for every single child. But without going off on a tangent into that debate, I mean, you guys are really thoughtful. You guys, like I say, very clearly, visibly care about your practice and developing. How do you stop yourself from over-analyzing and being overly critical of yourself?
My personality is very self-critical in everything that I do. It's helpful, but also a hindrance. And when it comes to classroom practice, there's lots of curriculum to get through. And so there's only so much time, which is essentially the main variable for teachers that they need to consider. And so over-analysing, I would refine the way that I would look at the video of myself teaching. I would maybe perhaps previously, when I was going through that instructional routine, trying to get it right, I would write down the parts that I needed to probably work on and just not over-analyse everything as a gist, but sort of break it down into small details and think about which of those parts has the highest impact for learning or learning outcomes, and just work on that one, and then work your way down the list. You sort of triage it, so to speak, what's going to have the most impact in terms of, research, and then work your way down. So I think from that instructional routine on VIPs, I was sort of self-reflecting, and I thought choral responses and sort of the questions that I was asking is something that I could have that I did work on first to start with. And it was probably the most trouble I was having with sort of creating those reverse order questions, saying, okay, you need to carry the 7. What do you need to do, class? Carry the 7. And sort of having that natural flow in your speech is actually quite difficult. And so that's something I just worked on. And then sort of read about scripting and rehearsing, deliberate practice. Harry Fletcher Wood, who's the director of Step Lab in terms of the training, he has a great sort of article, PDF, on deliberate practice and how scripting is actually really worthwhile, and then rehearsing it. So I found myself sort of rehearsing just before class started, just to have it refreshed. And then, so to not be over-analysing, but just taking one step at a time was most important. And it was quite natural as well. It's unnatural for someone to come in and say, oh, you need to work on X, Y, Z. It can happen a lot. But if you're just doing it yourself, you just take your own time. And so that's what I did, came about naturally.
I am also, my harshest critic. And when I did first see a video of myself teaching, it was ridiculous how many blunders I did per second. I guess the trick here is to focus on the quick fixes first. Pick out 1, 2, not many, just things that you care about that you're going to do a bit of deliberate practice on before you actually stand in front of the class. Low stakes, no kids in the room, just deliver it. And then, once you've figured out those easy, simple wins first, then you can be starting to be a bit more neurotic about the other things. But I'll just say another thing here is that if I'm sharing footage with a colleague, it actually sets a really nice tone if you are vulnerable and you are overly self-critical. That it just diffuses any kind of I know best kind of approach to teaching and learning, and and it invites the really critical discussion and the deep discussion to get to the meat of what we're trying to do here. So yes, when it's personal and you're just watching it for yourself, just pick up on a few simple, easy wins. But also, when you're talking with other people, take the guard down, be vulnerable, be your own harsh critic, lead the conversation by picking up on things that they might not be looking at that level of detail. Because it sets a really nice atmosphere in terms of just being open to critical reflection, and it fosters really positive relationship with colleagues as well, in my view.
That's fantastic, because striking that balance with colleagues when you're supporting other colleagues can be really difficult to see yourself as not part of the accountability process, and so to have that level of vulnerability built into it is, I think, really powerful. How do you make the reflection rigorous rather than vibes based? And I think we've already started to move towards that in your decision making processes.
You need to triage what is most impactful for your students when looking at your footage. But I also agree with Will, just those quick fixes can actually boost your own self-confidence of what you're actually trying to do. I definitely did that when looking at my own footage and thinking about, maybe perhaps just moving those students a little bit closer, or maybe it was something to do with myself in the way that I spoke. Definitely quick fixes I want to go about, but also, as I said, triaging the most important parts and going about that and refining it that way. It does take time, though. It does take time in terms of at the end of the day, looking back at the video. I think that was maybe the main barrier to self-coaching through video. And sort of, I like the way that Will's sort of speaking about sharing it with colleagues and going through the video with other colleagues' mental models of what they think good practice is, and sharing that tends to be more efficient. And that's sort of why I think about Step Lab and how it's so good, is that it builds sort of a model around that, around having someone come in and just being another set of eyes as part, like being that video, and not sort of having that top-down approach and sort of seeing it eye to eye with the coach and coachee. But going back to your question, just keeping it simple, having small steps, and just work at one thing at a time. I think that's the most important thing.
I mean, if we build on your response, I mean, do you use like a proper piece of software, or is it almost like note based? Because whenever I was doing my sort of doctoral research, they call it CACDAS, like computer assisted software for the qualitative research, and basically you can timestamp and you can make notes on precise points in a video document. Do you use anything like that, or is it just a case of playing it back on QuickTime and making notes?
When I was doing self-coaching, I was writing it down, just the main quick fixes and the main key leverages that I could probably work on the most. I was reading some books at the same time that were sort of pertain to teacher explanations as well. I think Zach Grochel's Just Tell Them was really, really helpful in terms of sort of anchoring ideas on what non-examples of teacher explanations could be. I think he speaks about like mazes, seductive details was sort of a term that I wasn't familiar with, but then realizing that was something that I was doing, sort of, going on a tangent a little bit just for the entertainment of the children, but then coming back to what I was teaching. So that was something I was doing too that I wasn't really aware of. Essentially going through those sort of ideas and trying to refine those is something that I've taken the most out of. But to answer your question, it would just be note form, writing the certain areas I'll be trying to work on next, and then in terms of having that note close by to plan forward and just remind myself when the upcoming lesson, because sometimes I'd watch the video the day before and then the next lesson would be the day after. So then I would just bring up that note to the front of the classroom, and I would have a teacher sort of desk, standing desk, and I'd just have it next to my laptop and be like, oh, okay, that's something I need to be consciously aware of when I'm about to explicitly teach in the next 10 minutes. And that's what I would do.
We use the Great Teaching Toolkit as a teaching and learning framework. And for me, that's important that we just have something in place where we have a shared terminology, a shared framework, a shared idea of what our school has decided is our approach to teaching and learning. And that feeds into the greater teaching and learning ethos of the school. You're making sure that your teaching is aligned with the school's vision, but also that when you are talking to colleagues, we're talking about something on the same page, literally in terms of the Great Teaching Toolkit. And Great Teaching Toolkit, along with many other frameworks, has individual elements that we can focus on today. And it helps direct the conversation in a very specific manner. So I would recommend that as wherever you are in the world or whatever school you're at, just have a shared teaching and learning framework to base the discussions off while you're having these conversations. So for us, the Great Teaching Toolkit does have a tool on there for uploading videos and sharing it with specific colleagues. And you have complete control over where that video goes as the person who recorded it. And that's really nice, because you want that reassurance that when you're going to put yourself on the spot and you're going to show yourself in being super cringe in a lesson, which I do. I want to make sure that I cherry pick the colleagues that I want to see that, and I don't want to make a fool of myself in front of somebody on the other side of school that I've only met once or twice before. However, that's if you have that technology in place, that's beneficial. If you don't, do it anyway, because visual reflections are good, and we don't want to add extra barriers or extra steps, because it's just such a good idea that we just want to make it as simple as possible for every teacher in the world just to do it a few times. And just video yourself, put it on a computer or a TV screen so you can watch it, and then bin it if you want to. If you want to share it with colleagues, just share a file in some secure way, or just take your laptop to them and say, we've got 5 minutes here. Do you mind watching this video with me? And send it through. So we don't need a platform for this. A platform can help, but if that becomes a barrier where somebody is somewhere is not recording themselves teaching because they don't have access to a good platform for this, well, it's time to figure out the simplest way to just do it, because it is incredibly powerful. It's a good idea, and I implore colleagues who are a bit scared of this to not put artificial barriers up for this and just have a go. And it is terrifying. It is super cringe. I've done it too many times now where I've just felt so embarrassed by what I saw in the video. But it was. I'm glad I did it. I'm really glad I did it.
Absolutely. I think what you guys are providing is very practical advice in terms of someone who's thinking, oh, this could be something I can engage with. Actually, you're giving them a really clear route through. And you mentioned both Step Lab and evidence-based education, because they're the host of the toolkit. And then I think probably walkthroughs is probably your third. Because I've had a number of conversations recently about core components. And if I talk about vibes, like core components, each of those groups had very specifically codified what the features of those core components are. So I think, walkthroughs, you'll have your 5 almost component parts. And you're talking about whiteboard use. Off the top of my head, it normally involves some sort of expectations being established, giving pupils time to respond, a signal that they're ready to review, then checking, like you described, and then what have you got? You've got you're actually acting on what you've seen. And so rather than cold calling being no hands up in class, it's actually a very specific routine, like you guys have described. So having that in tandem, I think, is really important because what we know about effective professional development, I think, falls apart when we mutate the core components, because the mechanisms and the implementation strategies are only as strong as how specific you've been, which is coming across really clearly in what you guys are saying. But just your mention of those are probably your three options, I think. I mean, forgive me if there's a fourth out there. I'm trying to think, maybe have Ambition done something similar, but there's the Step Lab Ambition crossover is strong, isn't it? So they're probably thinking along the same lines. So yeah, so I think that's really, really helpful. And if we're avoiding vibes probably means lethal mutations based on, I've got a fair idea of what this core component of high quality teaching is, but actually I don't really, and I haven't really thought that carefully about it, have I?
I'll just pick up on that. There are, Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction is freely available online. Doug Lamoff's Teach Like a Champion is very, you don't need a subscription for that. That's a book. And it's a cheap book. There are plenty of frameworks out there. And as long as you just all agree on what your shared teaching and learning view is, all of those that you mentioned, Kieran, and many others, are all rigorous and credible, evidence-informed teaching and learning frameworks that give us a starting point for these conversations. And as well, quite a few of them as well have their own superhero teachers with a skill level far beyond mine, who can show you what it really looks like when a superhero delivers this routine in a classroom, and that gives you an idea of what he's looking for, and the subtle sub-steps of each routine for that you can slowly build up over months and months and years of incremental refinement of the art of classroom teaching.
How could I forget Teach Like a Champion? Hi, silly. Yeah, the OG. Yeah, absolutely. You do not need, sorry, Doug, I apologize. Because I remember whenever I started my last full-time role in school, I had a PDF copy of 2.0, or like an ebook copy of 2.0. I remember it being almost like the when I'm giving advice to teachers, always going back to first principles and basics. I think superhero, I think probably describes our admiration, but I think really effective teaching is just being really consistent day in, day out, and executing those things, so is it Raichura Pratesh, who was in the Step Lab documentary? It's not bells and whistles teaching. It's just being really consistent in the execution of those routines. And I think, as much as you give yourself a hard time, well, you shouldn't put other teachers on a pedestal because they're just really effective in their role. It's almost like the Darren Fletcher. I don't know if to use an old soccer analogy. He didn't do the flashy stuff, but he just did the basics day in, day out. Because I know that you guys are almost existing in a world where the flash can sometimes take over, and I think it's really important to remember that we are, good and outstanding teaching is turning up every day and being consistently effective. When this kind of process becomes professional development, and so you're really clear about how you guys can make this work for you and take control of your PD, how do you stop it turning into performance management? Because I know examples where people have been asked to record and then they've almost been held under the fire because they've been recording and it's not been analyzed in the way that you guys describe. How do you avoid it becoming it's almost like a stick to beat teachers with and a performance management tool?
Fantastic point. This is definitely not professional management or performance management. It's detached entirely from that. And it is just two peers who trust each other discussing the art of classroom practice. So when we've done it at my school, we've really emphasised that this is not, this shouldn't really be done in terms of with your line manager. It should be doing grassroots from peers. And in the professional development group that I'm part of at school, there's only one other maths teacher in there, and she is not my line manager. And it is people from all over the school we're not all through schools, so primary colleagues as well are part of this. And we've made sure that it's very clear to any colleague that does share this visual footage of themselves that this is never ever to be shared in any way that can be considered as performance management or accountability or anything like that. And again, the big reason we're emphasizing that is because we want to emphasize that this is a safe space, to put yourself on show when you're doing your professional job that you passionately care about. And we want people to do this because we believe it's a very powerful professional development moment for colleagues. And anything we can do to take away that an anxiety or a barrier that could make someone think twice about giving it a go and doing a visual reflection of themselves. And as I say, if you're not comfortable sharing this to colleagues yet, just do it for yourself. Just do it for yourself and watch it. Once or twice yourself, and maybe when you're ready, that's when you share it with a colleague or someone you trust, who can reflect on this with you. But definitely not any accountability or anything like that. This is low stakes reflections.
From my experience, Kieran, I haven't had the instance where videos of teachers have been used for performance management. But what I will say is that teachers' interpretations of maybe other teachers dropping into classrooms or other teachers watching and getting them their understanding of, okay, video coaching or coming in to watch your classroom as a supportive role, not an evaluative role. I can understand and appreciate how easy it is to mix those two up, to think that, okay, someone's coming in, is it an evaluation or is it supportive? And usually, from my experience, it's been that performance management has been the most consistent over a teacher's career. So that's what they tend to think it is when a teacher comes into the classroom. So it's really important to have that conversation prior to, coming in and videoing a teacher or dropping into a classroom with a teacher and say, hey, look, this is fully supportive, not evaluative, low stakes, as Will said. We're here just focusing on one little action step. And yet just making sure the dialogue and the communication between coach and coachee or teacher to teacher, whatever it may be, that is the main point or the main idea of that conversation, that it is fully supportive and not evaluative, because that is a consistent battle, because performance management will always be there. But then knowing that this PD sort of is mutually exclusive and making sure that teachers know that is most important.
Yeah. And as you guys are saying that, there are times when, because a lot of my work in schools involves demonstration lessons and team teaching with people. And I can think of times where I haven't been clear enough about what we're focusing on. And the almost reflection medium that we have afterward has turned into like a lesson observation feedback. I'm like, that's not, I've clearly not done my job at the start here, because this was not what this is not the way this conversation is supposed to go. So I can see those parallels because, like, Will, you asked me to come into your session and we were thinking about what the audience would notice and were they operating, were they thinking about the same things that you were thinking about? So that clarity of this is what we're looking at, this is the codification of this. I think that probably is the biggest lever here in terms of not becoming performance management, because you can really focus people's attention. Would that be a fair interpretation?
Yes, absolutely. So going in with that agreed focus is helpful. And if you, as the person asking for reflective feedback, kind of go in leading the direction of the conversation, it invites criticism or it invites feedback, constructive feedback, from people who otherwise would be afraid to say, afraid to offend, or afraid to overstep the mark with feedback. And so if you if you go in first in that conversation with a focus in mind, that does help. I'll say one more thing with this as well is that, I wanted to, when it came to performance management, I wanted to make sure that colleagues understood that this really, really was not, and I was serious about it not being. And that's why I led, and did the visual model first and shared it quite publicly in the classroom full of about 12 colleagues in a professional development session. So they could see that I was being really open to critical discussion, and also that it was a safe space just to speak freely about what it is. And the feedback from that session was really lovely, where people walked away saying that was one of the deepest teaching learning discussions we've had in a long time. And it's because we had something to talk about, and the environment in the room was we can speak freely. I'm not gonna cry. It takes, but we are being critical, and we are being reflective, and we are getting to the meat of it on how we can improve this for me and the kids in the room.
I think the rationale behind why you're doing it needs to be continuous over the academic year. It's not just sort of one and done at the start of the year saying, oh, this is supportive, it's not evaluative, because, well, what do we know about learning? Often that is forgotten. And so I think we're battling in between performance management, but then also trying to have this supportive role. So yeah, having that rationale continuously spoken about and said, coming in, I know that every coaching session that I have, I'll always say, hey, look, just a reminder, I'm just another set of eyes in the classroom, just to see, what insights or what awareness to help you with, or build that awareness or insight. So yeah, I think that's really important to note as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's clear from what you guys are saying is that you're establishing these conditions in which teachers can thrive, and they can continually improve. To steal, is it Stuart Kime talks about being a little bit better every day, and that's what being an effective teacher is all about. And yeah, that's totally coming through in what you guys are outlining. If anyone, especially if they've been paying attention, they can trace how to set this up, what implementation might look like. But in terms of storage, safeguarding, clip length, are there any considerations for implementation that you've perhaps learned the hard way, or have learned, or have had to take on board as you've refined your processes? Is there anything, what are the things to watch out for, the things to do to really implement this without adding additional workload for teachers?
Well, based off my experience when I did self-coaching, it was only pretty much my own school computer using I think it was Google Drive, and then having to talk with head of school about it, and it was said it was fine. So, but then at GNS, the school I'm currently at, well, we have Step Lab. And I can't speak more highly about it, just for the fact that it's so makes the workload so much easier with uploading videos. It's got it there, it has its own tools where you can sort of take annotations, like you said, with the other program that you're using, Kieran. It has that capability as well. And then sharing it with colleagues, obviously it's all privately protected on the platform as well. So if I were to say that if your workplace or school has the budget for it, I would definitely highly recommend having a platform, whether it be Step Lab or Great Teaching Toolkit, where it's just systemized, ready for you to go. So then it can be school-wide and rolled out in a systematic way. That would be my suggestion, because other ways around it, I think it would just be more arduous and tedious to do yourself. So yeah, definitely reaching out to external platforms is probably the way to go.
I agree with that as well. The external platforms are very helpful. The Great Teaching Toolkit does encrypt videos, and you have to have a login and things like that, of course. And that gives you that level of reassurance that videos of young people are encrypted. I did double check with my safeguarding lead in the school that these videos are fine to share in the way that I wanted to, and I've not at all made them public in any way, other than presenting at one conference of them. And I tend to try and choose clips where you can't see the kids' faces, but there is software online where you can blur out faces as well. In terms of just the practicalities of it, in a more general sense, again, it's just any way that you can make it work so that you can record your lessons tomorrow. Because we don't need to add barriers here. But the easiest way is just a proper mobile phone, and the audio quality is fine for what we need this for. Up on the window ledge, facing you, standing at the front of the class. That's good enough. A cheap camera stand on Amazon is slightly better, and you can get them for around £15 that are the right height for what we need. And a mobile phone is absolutely fine. So make it as easy as possible for you to actually do it tomorrow, because it's a good idea, and we don't want you to forget about it, because if you leave it till next week, it won't happen, because we know what teachers are like. But if you did want to double down, and you did want to do this as a vehicle for school change or for school improvement, then you might want to invest a bit more time and do this in a more professional manner, where you've got more than one camera in the room and you edit them together. And I have done this once, because I was specifically doing this for professional development, not just for my own reflections, where I had one camera at the back of the camera stand, I had one camera on the front, and we have a in-house videographer at my school, who was able to edit these together. But I think I could have figured it out quite easily using iMovie on my laptop. And I did a big clap at the start to make sure both cameras were synchronized. And one camera was facing me, one camera was facing the students. And that was really powerful, because we saw the reaction of the students to everything I was doing. And we could flip between the cameras. As I gave the instruction, we could see the response of the students. Firstly, in terms of their response to routines and the fluency they had for and the habits they had in the classroom and developed. But also, as I said, as I alluded to earlier, the one of my fears was that some of my routines were too strict and too new to these students. And when I saw it and I saw the reaction of students in the room, all those fears went away, because I saw that every single one of them responded really warmly to what I was asking them to do. And that's really reassuring. And it reassures the people you're presenting to that this is completely possible in a warm, loving, caring, high expectations environment, which is, I think, what we all want in our classrooms. So, moral of the story, if it's just a reflection for you, make it as easy as possible. Make sure it's encrypted if you're sharing it in any way, and make sure it's you're only sharing it with people within your organisation online. Great Teaching Toolkit works for this. But if you do want to do this in terms of skill improvement and having a bigger impact more widely, then you might want to consider putting a bit more time in, having two cameras set up on two different stands, and seeing the teacher and the reaction of the students, because that reassures people that the ideas you're giving cultivate a lovely environment in the classroom as well.
As I'm listening, I'm thinking, right, okay, if a school or a group of schools are involved with Step Lab, they're involved with EBE, that's normally indicative that upstream there's some really sensible thinking about professional development, So I think, the access to those, I think, will be, it probably suggests that you're in a school where things are really sort of going in what I would describe as the right direction. I think you mentioned editing there, Will, and actually that springs to mind that Apple have recently put all of their products into one, like, almost ridiculously cheap subscription for educators. I think it's like £24 a year. and you get Final Cut, you get Logic, you get all the other, like their version of Adobe. I think it was only released on the 28th. So if anyone's an Apple user, you've got lots of tools there. And the tool I used was called NVivo. So the letter N and then Vivo. It's not the most, it's not the most polished, but it does the job. It does if you want to get really time stampy and sort of really focused on precise things, then, that's an option that doesn't require a massive whole school subscription. But I think, it's really clear from what you guys have outlined that there's almost like a low barrier to entry, but really high potential for this kind of deep reflection. And I think, we live in an age now where it's actually, like you say, just have your phone on the wall, and you're good to go. So I think hopefully people are listening and thinking, actually, I'm going to try this tomorrow. And if you're, as long as you're keeping things, like you say, encrypted, emails are very easy to encrypt, aren't they? I think you just put a certain code in most of them, so that sounds fantastic. And all I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Jack.
Thanks, Kieran. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to speak to you both. Thank you.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.